It's Karen speaking. So, welcome back to our final panel of the conference, where our speakers discuss effective ways of shaping inclusive disability and mainstream systems. Please welcome Joanne Jessup, Group CEO from Multicap Limited, Angela Mason, Deputy Director General, Housing and Homelessness Service, Department of Housing, Local Government, Planning and Public Works, and Ainsley Robertson, family member from Community Resource Unit. The panel will be facilitated by my friend Peter Tully, Director of the QDN Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that wonderful welcome and introduction to panel number 5. Yes, it is the last one for the day. And thank you very much for finally getting back in the room. And now we will have the task of trying to make up that 8-minute loss that Karen mentioned a minute ago. But anyway, with our timekeeper here in front of us, I'm sure we can do that. But as I begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and pay my respect to the elders, past and present. I would also like to acknowledge that I am wearing a blue shirt, which most of you in this room would know as my QDN blue shirt, because I have a few different roles and I like to have different colours depending on what I'm representing. And today, as Karen mentioned, I'm here as a QDN board member. I am a man that is about to enter the 60 years in November. So I don't call myself middle-aged. I am moving on. And I'm looking forward to, as I've shared with a few people, I'm looking forward to what I may contribute in the last 5 years or 8 years of my working life. I'm looking forward to retirement, in other words. But as we get back to panel, it gives me great pleasure and a great honour, thanks to QDN, to host this last panel, which is all about a topic that is very dear to many of us, shaping inclusive, mainstream and disability services. There are significant changes and significant reforms of disability services, mainstream, and people with disabilities and their families. We're going to try and cover what are the challenges and what are some of the key ingredients needed to deliver real change into the future. Each of the panel members, as they know, will have 8 minutes to respond to a question that I give them. And it gives me great pleasure to give my first question to Joe. And Joe and me have had our paths crossed over many different things in many different years over the disability sector. So Joe, your first question is, as a disability service provider, what does that look like for you? And then the second part of your question is, what role does your service system play and what are the importance over the next 5 years? Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. 2 very easy questions in 8 minutes. I am, although I aspire to be a middle-aged woman, a mature woman, possibly in age, possibly not in behaviour. I am wearing a bright purple and orange and yellow patterned dress and a blue jacket. So, the role of providers. In really simple terms, the role of disability service providers are that we are enablers. We are a really important part of the disability ecosystem, and the ecosystem, I think, just to ground us all, is much bigger than just the NDIS. Many of the services and organisations that work in this sector began long before governments were putting funding into disability supports, and I think that's a really important grounding point. The focus for those original organisations and the families almost predominantly that founded them was this belief that their children should have a better future than the one that they could see for them. And so they formed groups of families which formed organisations so that their children could live good lives and receive the supports that they needed to allow that to happen. Multicap, which is one of the organisations I am responsible for, has been around for 62 years. And that was started by a group of 5 families. And Open Minds, the other one that I am part of, has been around for 112 years and started in World War I when soldiers returned with shell shock. So we have a history that goes way before funded services in Queensland for people with disabilities. That's just a kind of, so we talked this morning about journey, right? This is a journey that we are all on. Organisations in this sector are committed to purpose, and they are absolutely committed to the people that they are in service of, and I think that's really important. We are really significant employers in this sector. In our organisation, group of organisations, we have 2,600 staff that we employ. So we contribute, a lot to the economic environment in the states that we are part of. We have very flexible working conditions, all in service of the people that we are in support of. Without quality service providers in this sector, the ecosystem starts to fail. And so that's why I come back to we are all important and key parts of the ecosystem being successful going forward. Regulation for the provision of services for vulnerable people is really important from our view as registered service providers. It puts safeguarding at the centre, and we talked this morning, we've heard some of the panellists talk about the importance of safety in the systems that we are part of. So without a doubt, 10 years into the NDIS, registered service providers in particular find ourselves at a very difficult part of the journey that we are in, and that's pretty evident to lots and lots of people. It's a really high cost to deliver services and to meet the needs of people who are requesting supports. The industrial relations framework, workforce, insurances, work cover, the NDIA having 3 systems in 10 years, which is really difficult to navigate. We've got a new national safeguarding system, which really is immature in the way that it is forming up. So we've got challenges in the regulated and registered disability service provider sector that are fairly formidable. And their recent data shows that many providers are actually struggling financially at the moment. That's just to say we're in a hard part of the cycle, but we are all focused on purpose and delivering quality services. So that's probably a little bit about disability providers and where I see us. Would you like me to answer the other one about 5 years?
Go for it, please, Jo.
So the ecosystem that supports people with disability is really important. And it must place people with disability and their significant others at the centre. And we have the support sector is just focused around that being important. That's part of the journey. That's where we started when families started organisations like Multicap, and it's where we should aspire to keep going to. For us, I think 5 years' time, it is really important that the NDIS is successful and viable and still there for people with disability across Australia. The current narrative that you are hearing about service providers in particular is all bad, isn't it? We hear about fraud, we hear about abuse, we hear about neglect, we hear about funding of non-evidence informed services and products, and none of those stories are particularly positive. But what we don't hear is stories like a lady who, because of her NDIS funding supports, she has spent the last 5 years getting out of her home 4 times. And NDIS services and NDIS supports have allowed her to have a life and allow her sister to go back to work. We don't hear about the young man who was living in hospital with 2 security guards and 3 RNs, who now is out in community living a great life and about to move into his own home because of the NDIS. And we don't hear about the young man who moves through supported employment and now has a permanent part-time job in mainstream employment on their award, not on any subsidised wages because of the NDIS. And I think those are the stories that we, over the next 5 years, need to get back into the conversations and the media. For us, foundational supports are really important. I know we don't know what they are, but when we decide what they are, I think we really need to leverage what already exists. So let's not waste time or resources in recreating things. Let's pick up what we've got and use it and work towards it being better and better over time. And for me, I would aim for the 80-20. I think we go with let's get it started and then let's work to improve it as we go forward. We're all more mature enough to be able to review and evolve services as we go, and that takes collaboration, diversity of thinking, and an open dialogue and collaboration. So I don't know if I've done that in 8 minutes, but the future is really positive and really bright, but it takes all of us as an ecosystem to ensure that that's where we land.
Wow, thank you, Jo. And you sure covered a lot in a short space of time, including taking me down a trip of memory lane of where my supported services started all those years ago when I was in a hostel in New Farm. So, and then you brought me right up to a story recently and how powerful storytelling is around two young gentlemen that you and me had the privilege of working with who would have been, we don't know where.
Yep.
And what you're sharing is absolutely correct. The importance of storytelling and starting to get some of those positive good news stories out so that we can start to think about what those mainstream services might look like for those people who don't have the NDIS. So thank you for your input, Jo. So now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Angela, who I've only just met, but I have heard about you on my disability journey over the years, and I'm really excited that you're going to be talking about housing and shaping and all that sort of thing, because I'm one of the lucky people that have had the privilege of building my own home in Ipswich. So your question is, Angela, role of partnering of inclusive housing with Queenslanders with a disability to shape and reform housing and leadership with the department. What does that look like?
Great, thank you so much, Peter. And look, I think the first thing is thanks to QDN for having us here today and for being able to partner and connect with you so much through government, because I think it's important that that voice is there. My name is Ange Masson. I'm DDG Housing and Homelessness Services. I'm going to hold on to my middle age. I'm not going to let it go like you. I'm actually going to hold on to it. I've got short wavy hair that's very dark, and if my hairdresser's listening, it does actually have a little hint of violet through it as well. And I'm wearing a bright orange shirt with a black pantsuit today. So that inclusive housing piece is so important for us. And, you know, on the June this year, on the 13th of June, I was privileged enough to be the MC to launch the Partnering with Queenslanders with Disability at Parliament House, and it was such an honour there with the Minister Mullen and also with Minister Scanlon to attend that and really start to work through what does inclusive housing look like and how do we actually work through some of those critical key co-design elements. Now, my portfolio is rapidly becoming a priority in national and state reforms for many reasons. But the reasons that we'd be familiar with here today include the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability, the NDIS review, and the Queensland Parliamentary Inquiry into the provision and regulation of supported accommodation in Queensland, which was handed down to that on the 7th of June, and government's currently preparing its response. But notwithstanding these reforms and these inquiries going through, there is positive change on the front for people with disability. The launching of that plan, as I mentioned, the Partnering with Queenslanders with Disability 24-27, I think the longest name of any plan that we currently have, actually has an amazing co-design document that actually goes alongside that particular plan to ensure that what we are doing is actually working with the sector to do what is needed. There are so many things that we have highlighted in that plan, and it's actually backed, and this is the thing that I think is really exciting and really important, because this is where the rubber hits the road. There's $55.9 million attributed to that delivery of those elements in that plan. So it's not just a plan of words, it's actually a plan that we can bring to action, and the funding is genuinely there to do that. But what we actually loved about this plan as well is that it was co-designed with about 60 people across the network to actually really have the voice of people with disability embedded in that document. They are their words, they are your words, they are our words, and together I believe that we can move forward in what we need to do in the housing sector. What we need to understand is, what does home mean to people? And home can mean so many different things, and how do we actually bring that together? And so what we've actually done is highlighted some really key points in the plan. And what we want to do is make sure that we're really bringing that voice forward, but we're also doing that in looking at what we're doing with the building of our stock, and what does that housing stock look like, and ensuring that we have more gold and platinum standard homes being built or being renovated to those standards, so that we can actually have access for community. Over 45% of people on the housing register that I look after are identified as people with disability. So that's something we have to be mindful of as government, that we're actually taking that into consideration. But what we also need to ensure is that we're also looking at the low income households as well, because we also appreciate that we have people with disability across the entire state, and Queensland is a very big state. And what happens is the connectivity with services cannot be overlooked. We need to ensure that the services that people with disability need and require are available to them, because they're not always just sitting there in that mainstream service. So when we're actually placing people, placing accommodation, or making decisions, it's actually done with the voices of those and listening to those who require those services. So we want to make sure that people are not staying institutionalised longer than needs to be. We need to make sure that we're looking at what the forward plan is and what the forward horizon is. And one of the key points that we've got there is now my mind's just left me for a minute, it's the 53,600, 53,500 homes that we need to build in Queensland between now and 2040. 63, is it? Thanks. I'll look to my team, see if they can flag. It's a number I roll off every day. I didn't even write it down. So we need to ensure, but the key points that we've gone through to make sure that we can drive real change is co-design matters. A strong message that came through our co-design journey is that people with lived experience of disability must have a voice in the planning, design and implementation of matters that impact their homes. Safe, affordable and accessible homes are fundamental for people with disability to have a good life. It's the foundation for good health. The key thing here as well is choice. People must be able to exercise choice, not just over the home that they have, but who they live with and who attends that home and who can actually come and visit them in that home. That choice is just so important. We need to move away from the outdated legacy models of group homes. That's no longer the way that it should be. We need to move away from vertically integrated service providers to ensure that there is choice again, that it's not just the home that you live in dictates the service that you actually receive, that you can ensure you receive the services that are needed, and that they're delivered separately, because then this actually avoids people missing out or people not being able to gain access to services just because of where they live. So it's making sure that there is accessibility for all of those involved. So I think that's, for me, the key elements of where we think housing can start to make a difference. It's a long journey, it's a tough journey. We are in a housing crisis that touches us all. It's those with disability, those without, those with high incomes, those with low incomes. It's something that Queenslanders see in all aspects of their day-to-day living. So I think by having the Partnering with Queenslanders with Disability plan and its co-design journey document are the key things that as housing we are committing to. And one of the key things that we're doing right now is looking to ensure that we have people with the right voices. So we've kicked off the request for our expert disability panel, and that will be completely contain people with disability and chaired by people with disability as well, to ensure that those voices are never lost and in fact that they become the loudest in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And wow, just like Joe, you took me on a bit of a trip down memory lane, because in my younger years I lived in several houses, and as I said earlier, I was fortunate enough later in life to build my own home in Ipswich. But I guess the key message I take away from what you've been sharing is the importance of people with disability being involved in the whole planning process. And I can share with you that I totally am pleased to hear you say co-design a few times. And it's really important that we co-design, we do it from the beginning to the end. And the reason I share that is because I've been privileged in my other role to attend a couple of health forums over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that I've been saying there is the home is the foundation for someone with a disability. And then from that location, wherever they choose to live, you can then build their services, their health, their employment, their whatever. And also, people with disabilities need a stable home to be able to access services, because unless you've got a registered address, it's very hard to access services. So because I believe a home is the foundation of building on everything else, I'm so pleased to hear what you shared this afternoon. So thank you. So last but not least, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Ansley. And the reason it gives me pleasure to hand over to Ansley is because she is a parent of a child with a disability, and she plays a number of roles in helping families shape their systems and services. And she's going to share with us some examples of how she's done that and where it worked well in the practice. So, Ansley, over to you, and along with that, you're going to share how the collaboration and partnership for children with disabilities and their families and educators could look different into the future.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I'd like to say thank you to QDN for this invitation today to come along. My name's Ainsley. I am a fair-skinned, almost 51-year-old, and today I'm wearing a dark navy blue polo skivvy neck jumper and black leggings as well. So, yeah, I'm going to hone in on the education piece today, because that is an area where there are still so many challenges for families and for our society as well. And we know that when children go to school together, when they learn, play and grow together at their local school, they are most likely to build communities that are inclusive and go into work roles and have workplaces that are inclusive as well. So schooling is a very important area and one that I'm very passionate about. And I've also been asked to talk today about a couple of the challenges that families are facing and some ways forward through that collaboration between schools and families. So I also wanted to start today by acknowledging that even though there are still so many challenges in that education space for families, that we have come such a long way. And I am standing on the shoulders of many great people who have come before me. And we have an excellent inclusive education policy here in Queensland, one which is world leading. Yet we still have a long way to go, as we know from the Disability Royal Commission and as we know from the statistics that keep coming up and through in the paperwork. So two of the key challenges that I know myself as a family member has faced and the families that I connect with face are, one is that dilemma of schooling choice that keeps coming up for us. and also a real, still collective, impoverished understanding of what inclusive education really is. So, as Kevin Cox said before, stories are really what brings people to the heart of the understanding of the experience. I'm going to share my family's experience here and there and what I'm going to share today, and because I know that is a similar experience to many of the families that I interact with. So, 10 years ago, I was that parent who did not know about anything much about inclusive education. I didn't understand my son's rights or what was possible, the different policies. I saw disability through that medical model lens. I'd spent my son's early years getting along to all those therapy appointments and all those medical appointments and hearing about all the deficits. So when he was in his second year of prep at school and that choice was put on our table, that it might be better for him to go to a segregated school, I didn't have the knowledge or the skills or the language to navigate that. So, and I also expect that the staff at the school really didn't have those understandings as well. So it wasn't long until we were directed and we headed off to a segregated school across town, and all the things that I was promised didn't come to fruition. My dear son's mental health, his well-being, etc., continued to go downhill. And it was by luck, really, that a friend came to me with some information around my son's rights, around inclusive education, and around what could be possible. And it really spoke to my heart. Just going to have a little sip of water because I can feel my mouth getting dry. Apologise for that. Yes, so it was really just that strike of luck. But then I had to go really hard at learning around what was possible for my son, finding out that information, taking it further, trying to link with parents. It wasn't easy, it was hard work. And I had a whole sea of information, though, that was coming to me around the segregated options and also that he should be returning to special school. So yeah, it was a matter of chance. And unfortunately, that is still the case 10 years down the track as I meet with families. It still seems to be that strike of luck that they've come across this information. And what I find too, as I start to talk to professionals in this space as well, is that they're really quite shocked when they come across the information and get to find out what inclusive education really is about and what the rights are and what is possible. And it is still very much resting, that information getting out to people, on small organisations like the one I now work for, community-led organisations, and to the network of families that are now out there. So it still is that matter of chance and luck. So that sort of brings me to the second part, talking around, well, what needs to change and how can we collaborate better? How can we shift this so it's not just up to that chance? And what does really create that change? So I'll return back to my family story. And when I didn't know that information for my son, I was heading into school meetings with my shoulders down, with a whole heap of medical reports, and apologising really for him being at the school, which is really sad for me to reflect on now because I was really perpetuating that myth that he was too hard. Is my mic still going? However, now that I've got the information and I'm aware of my son's rights and I see things through the social model, I head into those school meetings with my shoulders back, my head held high. I come in with a collection of the latest photos, and I now come in with my son who's leading those conversations and talking to the staff around what adjustments work for him. And I'm seeing reflected back now from the staff the same as what we're giving as well. So that's what creates real change, is getting families out there involved and informed and sharing this information with the schools. But it shouldn't just rest on the shoulders of families. Yes, that creates real change, and there is an army of them now out there doing this work and creating that change. but we need to be getting the information out, the professional development, the information across to our medical professionals. We need to be getting those positive stories out across Australia around what is possible and shifting those mindsets. And yeah, that's really what's going to create that change and make people come together. And wouldn't it be good if we could have professionals, teachers and families learning in the same room together so that we can keep each other to account and show that we are really trying to move forward for our children and create more inclusive schools, more inclusive communities for all. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Angie. And can I say that the key nugget that I got from that, based on my wife's son's journey, because she brought our son up as a single mother, is you're saying the importance of engaging families and the person with a disability right from the start and making it their journey and bringing them, the school, in on the journey and sharing those stories. And by doing that, you might be able to find, through a form of co-design, you might be able to find some solutions for moving forward. Because in my school years, as a few of the people in this room know, my main focus was not education. In my school years, my main focus was therapy. So, you know, great to hear that story. So as I'm given the responsibility of wrapping up this panel, I just want each of you to give one quick response. If you could leave one key action that people could take from what you shared this afternoon, what would that be? And I'll hand over to you first, Jo.
Thank you. So my key insight, one word, passion. Let's see lessons and not obstacles. We are all a really essential part of this ecosystem, and we need to work together to make sure that people can achieve what they aspire to. So my insight is passion. My key action is courage. It's time for us yet again to step up, speak out, and collectively take leadership roles in this next stage of our journey around foundational supports, whatever we decide that actually is. So my action there is, I really think we need to stand up now around foundational supports. Let's not wait for the rest of the country to get their act together. We in Queensland can actually lead this and show the rest of Australia what is good in disability services.
Thank you.
Okay, my key insight is that we need to ensure that people with lived experience with disability are at the heart of the planning and the decisions that impact their life. It should be actually part of our core business going forward, and co-design and the passion as well, and engagement of people with lived experience of disability and the disability sector are so important in helping shaping the work and the products that we and the services that we provide. My action is that I'm actually asking everyone to consider how you can contribute towards achieving our vision in the Partnering for Inclusive Housing and adopt and promote the housing principles for inclusive housing of rights, choice, control and inclusion. The rights are people with disability have the same rights to housing and support as people without disability and are empowered to exercise their rights. Their choice is people with a disability have a choice about where they live and who they live with. Control is about the provision and management of housing is separate from the provision and management of the paid supports. And inclusion is housing provides a pathway to independence and enables social and economic participation. If you need any further information on any of these things in our Partnering for Queensland, come and see me, see my team, jump on the website, have a look. There's many different versions and accessible versions of this because the partnering with Queenslanders with disability can only come to life with the joy, spirit and hard work of us all.
Thank you. And then Angie.
Thank you. My one key insight is inclusive education is the foundation of inclusive societies, and we'll continue to see inclusion in our communities move at a snail's pace unless we significantly bolster inclusive education knowledge and skills across the broader community and support all families and children with disability to learn, grow and thrive. Key action is, if you feel as though that your understanding of inclusive education is shaky, get out there and interact with the information. There's plenty on CRU's website. If you look up CRU and look for Families for Inclusive Education. In Queensland, we also have the Centre for Inclusive Education at QUT, that has excellent information on their website as well. So those are good go-tos. I've brought along some of our CRU resources today if people would like some of those as well. So we need to make inclusive education everyone's business. It shouldn't just be the business of families and those few teachers who are trying to move it forward. We need to build the awareness by having a conversation. So once you get informed, have a conversation with a colleague, with a relative, or even a stranger about inclusive education and its importance, not just of students with disability, but its importance for everyone. It builds a stronger community for us all. Get people thinking more broadly and asking questions about the next steps that they could take to strengthen an inclusive education system in Queensland and Australia.
Great. Thank you very much. Please join me as we thank our panellists for the discussion this afternoon.